Next, I want to take a look at how we can work with another one of the filters, which is part of the Blur Gallery family of filters. And this one's called the Field Blur. In order to work with this filter, let's convert the background layer to a Smart Object layer. Here we'll right-click or control-click the layer, and then choose Convert to Smart Object. After having done that, we'll navigate to the Filter pull-down menu. Here we'll select Blur, and then choose Field Blur. That will launch this image which we've worked on previously inside of the Blur Gallery. And I wanted to use this image that we worked on previously in order to make a comparison between Tilt Shift and Iris Blur. In order to make a comparison between Field Blur and the other blurs that we've worked with inside of this gallery. Well, here what Field Blur allows us to do is to have a point where we're applying blur. And let's say that what I want to do is I want to blur out the background of this photograph. So I'll position this point here, and then we can dial in how blurry we want that to be. Next, you can click to add another point, say on an area that you want to protect. I want to protect the car, and then reduce the blur value to 0. In doing that, you can see we have a blur area above, and the area below is protected. And in a sense, I think of Field Blur kind of like a competitive sport, because these two different points are going to fight with each other. They're on a playing field, and here they're going to push back and forth. If I click and drag this one closer, you can see how this is pushing away that blur. If I move this off to the right, you can see it's protecting this side of the field, so to speak. And again, we can move this around in order to protect different areas. Now I can also say, well, you know what? I want the car to be in focus, but I want the street to be out. So here we'll click on this area to add another point. So now we have two blur areas and one area that is protecting the car. As I drag this further away, you can see there's a little bit more of a transition, or as I reposition this, I can also control the overall transition area. Now, what about bringing in another point of blur? Well, we can do that by clicking over here. So again, it's almost like I've created this circular shape, which we were able to do when we worked with the iris blur in order to protect a certain area of the image. Yet what's different about Field Blur than Iris or Tilt Shift is we can create effects which you just couldn't create on camera, which would be impossible to create with a lens. What I can do is add another point of focus. If I want this guy in the corner here to be in focus, I'll click to add another point, and that'll go ahead and remove the blur. So here we can see we have one area of focus and then another over here. And we can also customize each of these areas. Click to activate any of these blur fields, and here I'll just click to activate and then drag down the blur amount so that I have a little bit less blur. In this case, I want to try to create something which is a bit surreal or fantastic, where we have these different blur points where we're able to focus on different areas of the photograph. I'm going to add another one over here on this light and this building up top over here, so I'll go ahead and decrease the blur value over there. And in this way, it's almost like the areas of focus travel around the photograph. And what's fun about this technique is you can always just customize it by clicking and dragging and moving these points around. Now, I always like to evaluate the progress of what we've done here by pressing the H key in order to hide the overlays, then by clicking on the preview checkbox to see the before, and then also to see the after. Now here with this photograph, we're creating kind of a fantastic effect. Again, one which would be really difficult to create any other way. Yet while I'm showing you this technique, keep in mind that you can use Field Blur in a lot of different ways. I actually saw Field Blur being applied on one of the catalogs that we received at our house. And on the cover of the catalog, there was a product. The product was in the middle of the image, or in the middle of the page, and that was in focus. And then you could tell they had added some Field Blur points in order to blur out some of the other details in the surrounding environment so that you could focus in on the product. So you can use this technique with product photography, automotive, architecture, landscape, street photography like this here, and it can help you to create some really fun and fantastic results. Next, let's go ahead and click OK in order to apply this. Because we applied this filter as a smart filter, we have a lot of flexibility. So here I can click on this eye icon to see the before and then now to see the after. Now you may have noticed that when we work with the blur gallery, we'll go ahead and click and drag this layers panel out so we can see a bit more of it. You may have noticed that the icon which allows you to apply blending has disappeared. We can't just click on that to change the opacity. Yet we can control opacity by working on the mask. Here we could fill the mask with a certain color black, or we could paint on the mask as well. I'll grab the brush tool. I'll select black from my color picker, and then here I have 30% opacity, and I'm just going to paint over a few areas in the image. In this way, I can paint away the blur effect so I can really customize it if I want to bring in a few more items into focus here. Paint at a higher opacity if you want to bring it back into its full focus. I'll press the right bracket key to make my brush bigger. And so in this way, I can really customize this and have some fun with how this blur effect is being applied to the photograph. If ever you're working with masking and you realize, you know what, my mask doesn't look very good, or I want to undo that, well, you can always just shift-click the mask. That will temporarily disable it, and it will bring back all of the blur effect which you originally applied to the photograph. Yet here, I simply wanted to highlight that you can also work on your mask if you want to customize the blur effect even further. All right, well, before we wrap this up, let's take a look at the before and after. Here it is. There is the before, and then now here is the after.